Yeah, the resolution is very important.
Is this on? Is this working? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and welcome to the press briefing on the UN Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security. It was unanimously adopted yesterday by the Security Council on 9 December. In the back of the room, we'll have copies of the press release, and we'll also have available copies online and also for download. Joining us today as speakers is Ambassador Dina Kawar, the permanent representative of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan to the United Nations, Mr. Oscar Fernandez Taranco, the United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support, Mr. Ahmad Al-Handawi, the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, and Ms. Sabah Ismail, a young peace activist from Pakistan, who is working to promote peace and countering violent extremism in northwest of Pakistan. Sabah's organization is part of the United Network of Young Peacebuilders, a youth-led network that advocated for the Youth, Peace, and Security Resolution passed yesterday. We'll give 3 or 5 minutes for each speaker, and then we'll open up to a Q&A moderated through me. Ambassador?
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to hear us. I'm so happy to be here today and say that yesterday we delivered upon a promise that the Crown Prince, our Crown Prince, made to all the youth that work with him. It was during the conference that he actually organized with the UN agencies and with the youth envoy and other parties in Jordan during the month of August. And this, in fact, was a continuum of a process that started in April during our presidencies. If you recall, we held one of the open debates about youth and extremist violence. And so yesterday we were able to adopt this resolution, which is the first in the Security Council that discusses youth, their role in peacemaking, peace building, participation, the role of the world to protect youth from extremist violence and to put forward to give them a more important role. So we're happy because this work all throughout this year is ending up with this, what we call our Crown Resolution, very important, and which will also prepare us next year for more work in the General Assembly on the work of the youth. Now, you all have the resolution, you've seen it, I don't need to go through it, but this is the only thing I wanted to start with and say, and of course, we will continue to work on that issue. We want to make sure that there will be programs that we will work with the UN agencies on the ground, through the press, through the youth. We want it to be a process that is led by the youth for the youth, and that we feel certain outcomes on the ground. So that's all I want to say about the resolution, and maybe we can give the floor to others to say and answer questions later on.
So we'll go to Oscar.
Yeah, no, thank you again for coming here. And I just use this important, I would say historic and quite groundbreaking resolution. We usually can anticipate certain types of resolution coming from the Council, but this is the first time that we're bringing the very important role of youth on issues of peace and maintenance of peace and security. And I think it's very important, following also from the other very historic resolution 1325, which has been the object of so many Security Council deliberations. We hope that 2250, as it's been coined, will equally now from here on, as the resolution calls, every time we have an SRSG, a mission on the ground, or the efforts of the UN working with governments and civil society, this notion of what we're doing to precisely have a much more inclusive policy to bring in youth in all aspects of peace building. I think coming at least from the office that I'm honored to lead and my colleagues, the process to get to this resolution has been characterized very much by what we are all striving to also translate in the form of this new SDG agenda, this notion of inclusiveness and partnerships under the leadership of the government of Jordan, together with the Youth Envoy, together with civil society organizations and many, many networks of youth peace builders. Many years of work, I think, is the accomplishment of this very historic resolution. Maybe just to give a particular recognitions to the United Network of Young Peace Builders, and particularly our colleagues from civil society, including Search for Common Ground and World Vision International, who's been really accompanying this process, at least closely with the UN and the Jordanian mission here in New York, to make sure that this resolution finally got adopted just before the end of the year, and again, to pay very special tribute. I think a groundbreaking event was precisely the very important global forum on the role of youth in peace and security that was held in Amman under the visionary leadership of His Royal Highness Crown Prince Al Hussein bin Abdullah II, who was personally very much engaged, along with more than 500 representatives of youth organizations throughout the world, that actually came up with the Amman Declaration, which I think propelled this very important resolution in the Council. So just to express how pleased, how honored for us in the Peacebuilding Support Office, this also opens up a new venue of programmatic activities of the sort that we are going to be engaging in. So again, to congratulate the real drivers of this resolution that are here present today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's indeed a historic achievement for the youth sector and for young people around the world. I describe this resolution as a good news for the 600 million youth who are living in conflict zones of fragile security situations. And for the first time, the Security Council dedicated a resolution that is acknowledging the role of young people as peace builders and then as partners in countering violent extremism. My thanks, of course, go to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, to His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, Prince Al Hussein bin Abdullah II, for his leadership and for utilizing the Jordanian presidency of the Security Council in April to convene that historic debate in youth, peace, and security, which resulted to the forum in Amman, and the forum in Amman with participation of 11,000 young people. They drafted a Amman Youth Declaration, and the declaration called explicitly for the need to fill that policy gap at the international level and called for the Security Council to adopt a new agenda on youth, peace, and security in the 15th anniversary of 1325 resolution. So what we have today is probably a reassurance for young people who have been always talking about the need for young people and youth groups to be involved in the fight against violent extremism, but for their role to be recognized as peace builders. And it's also a recognition to the fact that youth forums could result with concrete deliverables and achievements. And I think this is a very fine example of showing that these youth forums, and when young people come together and they put their voices and their demands concretely in a declaration like the one we had in Amman Youth Declaration, Youth, Peace, and Security, is being captured by the Security Council, and the Council reacted in that declaration. So I think we have something to be proud of as organizations and offices and actors working in the youth sector. Why this is important as well, because the 5 elements that we have today and the resolutions are exactly what we have been looking for and asking for a long time. We talk about participation because as clearly in peace building operations and peace building efforts, we have to engage young people in a systematic way. I always say that young people sometimes are being sent to die in conflicts, but when it comes to negotiations, they are not being invited to the negotiation table. And I think this resolution is calling as well for the engagement of young people in peace negotiations and to be included in these efforts, the element of protection and the prevention, and the call for a global partnership and for better coordinated efforts and investing in the power of young people as peace builders. And of course, the question of reintegration of young people who have been affected by conflict. So this with a heavy focus, I would say, this resolution offers us that guidance how to work in youth issues and engaging young people in conflict settings. But beyond that is a good news once again for young people and this largest generation of young people around the world, where we are departing with this resolution that era when we describe youth only as perpetrators of conflicts or as victims, to talk about young people as peace builders. and as an opportunity for peace building, not a liability in peace and security, the security agenda. Another important shift that we mark with this resolution is that the international community today realized that the question of investing in the power of young people is no longer only a question of development, the classical development debates that we usually have with education, employment, etc. But today the Security Council also recognizing that working with young people is in the heart of the debate around peace and security. So we are very encouraged and very pleased with the adoption of this resolution. This is, of course, the result of hard work by young people, youth organizations working peace building efforts, with many actors in the UN system who supported this process, and we are very thankful to the government of Georgia and the members of the Security Council for reacting to a minute declaration and the call of young people, and we are very much looking forward to move ahead with seeing how we could seize this momentum to get young people on board for the fight against violent extremism, but also to lift up the moderate voices around the world and ensuring that the power of young people is recognized in all processes as young peace builders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sabah.
Thank you so much. I'm a young peace activist from Pakistan working to counter violent extremism and promote peace in the northwest of Pakistan. I, along with my sister, established Aware Girls, which is a young women-led organization working to counter violent extremism by using a peer-to-peer education model, a model in which young people reach out to other young people who are vulnerable to the violent ideologies and to be vulnerable to be recruited by the militant groups, and which they provide them an alternative narratives that is based on nonviolence, tolerance, pluralism, and compassion, and prevent other young people from joining the militant ranks and groups. We engage both young men and women and shape our approaches accordingly because we experience firsthand the differentiated impact a conflict has on both young men and young women. As research has shown and has highlighted in the research in the recent global study on women, peace, and security, gender equal societies are more resilient to conflict and violent extremism. I speak here today on behalf of UNOI, United Network of Young Peace Builders, a global network of youth peace-building organizations like Aware Girls. UNOI is one of the co-chairs of the Interagency Working Group on Youth Participation in Peace Building, together with Peace Building Support Office and Search for Common Ground. UNOI has been advocating for a security resolution, a Security Council resolution on youth, peace, and security since 2012. And when young people from the platform of UNOI started advocating it, we were told that that UN is a slow process, and even it can take more than 10 years even for the idea to get recognized. By working in close partnership with other civil society organizations, notably Search for Common Ground and World Vision, as well as with other UN partners, including Ahmad, our UNOI on Youth, Peace Building Support Office, UNFPA, UNDP, UN Habitat, and UN Women, we have worked to strengthen the recognition of young people as partners and peace builders. We are very happy to see the leadership posed by Jordan on this issue and would like to extend a big thank you to Ambassador Kawar for bringing the resolution to the Security Council. Let me also clarify one more thing, that this document for national and grassroots level initiatives doesn't mean that it will be a top-bottom approach, but it will be a bottom-up approach, because this document was the dream of young people like me, and it's our document too. Resolution 2250 will empower young people and youth-led organizations to hold their governments accountable, to make sure governments invest in young people. And this is also a document to encourage civil society at the grassroots level to engage young people in peace-building processes. It's a document which will also encourage young people to be the agents of peace in their communities. Through this document, grassroots youth-led peace-building organizations will be able to create a global impact. I urge that all the member states of the UN to work hard in cooperation with young people, fund our efforts appropriately to bring the impact of this document to the grassroots level without any delay. In Pakistan, I'm going to use the resolution 2250 to include young people at the policy level of peace building. I'm going to hold policymakers accountable through this document if they don't. And I'm also going to use this document to bring shift in the values at community level that peace is not just about men, it's about women too. We need to recognize that young women face double discrimination due to gender and age, especially when it comes to participatory processes in peace. I congratulate everyone who shared our dream, who supported our dream of having an international instrument on youth peace and security. This document has marked the history of the world by recognizing that we, the young people, both men and women, are not just the victims and perpetrators. We are the partners in peace building you need. Peace cannot be achieved without us. It has to be achieved through us, with us, and for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All good? All right, we'll open up to questions now.
Welcome on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. My name is Evelyn Leopold, and when Ambassador Kawar organized the meeting in April, one of the speakers said that middle-aged imams are not going to prevent people from joining ISIS or Al-Qaeda or other terrorist groups. It had to be young people speaking to young people, both those returning and to prevent those going and to use those returning. So aside from the very interesting and energetic work in Pakistan that you just described, are there any other projects or how do you visualize this?
Should I say a few words? Sure. Yeah. Okay, thank you. On a national level, I have to say that we do have a program of what we call rehabilitation program for youth, which is a very successful program in trying to bring back youth into society and, away from extremist violence and all of the above. We're not the only country to do that, but I know others do. However, what you're asking is that what are our next plans? And I have to tell you one thing. This issue of extremist violence and the youth and its role, it has been going on for a few years, but the impact is becoming so big because we realize that the issues to deal with in order to stop it are multi. We realize that there is no one category of youth. We realize it's not talking about poor because there are lots of rich. We're not talking about uneducated because there are universities. We're not talking about people coming from developing countries because you have people coming from France. So all of the people who are writing on the topic and who are doing research tell you there's not one example of what is a youth. So it's really something, I could say it's something new and lots of research, and we in Jordan are helping a lot these researchers to come and study all these issues. But definitely one thing is for sure is that the majority of youth who are positive, who want to, we should mobilize them. The UN entities should mobilize them. Countries and governments should, and the civil society, of course, should mobilize them because they are using the media and the very modern ways of recruiting. And I think the only way to fight back is using these modern ways of communicating. They are wanting to impress each other. Well, the majority will tell them it's not very fancy to go and be a kamikaze, or it's not at all as it looks. And I think that they would know how to address these issues amongst themselves. Of course, in Jordan we have a young decision-making society. His Majesty is young, the Crown Prince is young, and so there is more, if you want, we are in touch with our youths, but this should be the case everywhere. And so that's what I'm saying, that hopefully next year and on the level of the General Assembly, and I maybe did not thank enough the UN agencies and also the civil society and the youth envoy for all the work they've been doing, but I'm not thanking them because I'm going to work with them more next year, so I have to leave some room. There's so much more to do, and we need maybe to keep in touch to see how we can go about doing these things.
Anyone else like to answer? Comment?
No, I think the ambassador just referred to something absolutely crucial, that this is all about building trust, building inclusivity, opening spaces for participation, and looking at the issues not from one particular agenda. I think the notion that we need to incorporate human rights dimensions, economic dimensions, socio-political dimensions, sociocultural and even intergenerational dimensions into the way we work with youth and how we make them the central part of our programming efforts, our inclusive political participation, economic participation, providing opportunities. So going back to the issue of social cohesion, which is at the heart, the breakdown of social cohesion, the breakdown of trust, the lack of opportunities of participating and having the voice of youth being counted, whether it's in peace negotiations, whether it's in the follow-up of peace accords, whether it's in defining national policies. This is exactly what this resolution is speaking to, aspects of protection, but aspects of participation. And I think it's a particularly timely, as we are about to start with this very ambitious development agenda. That notion of inclusivity is fundamental to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think this does a lot to actually integrate the aspects that have to do with economic development, social, cultural, security issues, as well as human rights issues. So it's a very complete resolution, as resolutions go, and definitely provides a lot of guidance and a lot of authority. I mean, it's not every day that the Security Council, the maximum organ of decision-making in this organization, pronounces itself on something that has been missing, and that I think legitimizes very powerfully the role of young people. And here in this resolution actually defined between 18 and 29. So here you have the biggest generation on the planet right now. This is the portion of the population that is the biggest right now. It's a generational opportunity to actually do something different. And from the point of view of the UN, it's interesting that working around youth has actually forced us, in many respects, to work with civil society, to work with youth organizations in a manner that usually doesn't happen in the UN. And I think a lot of credit goes, again, to the alliance of youth peace builders and their own energy and conviction, and the fact that it became clear that we needed a policy framework. And again, we have to see this as a policy framework because there are accountabilities about how this is translated into real practice, understanding that different countries and different conditions and different dynamics come to play. But certainly, at least for our peace-building support office and the way we work across the UN system, it provides tremendous guidance for the types of programs that can do a lot to empower and to strengthen the role of young people, young women and men in their respective societies.
Matthew.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks a lot for this briefing. It's interesting. I wanted to ask about exactly that, how it will be implemented. And I'm using the example of Yemen. I've seen the special envoy Ismail Sheikh Ahmed issued some ground rules to the two sides and said, mindful of UNSC 1325, he strongly encourages each delegation to include at least 2 women, which I don't know if is going to take place, but that was his recommendation. Do you expect this resolution to be like a 1325 in the sense of having people that are mediating recommend participation of youth at a certain level? And for the peace-building office, I know you're active in Burundi. How would this be implemented there in terms of the talks? Do you think that Mr. Benamor will say, like, where are the youth? Where does it, in the countries where the UN is actually active, how should it be implemented and how will it be implemented?
Okay, I would just, there is a very important dimension, I think, and thinking about the implementation of this resolution, I think it offers that important guidance that we definitely have to bring young people at the table of these negotiating, the different negotiations. We see today young people are paying the highest price of perhaps of peace and security. They are suffering because of conflicts, and I think it's fair and there's a common sense as well to inviting people and their representatives to be part of any peace negotiations. Now, the participation element in this resolution offers that, and I think this is a starting point for this efforts about seeing how we could further engaging people in the efforts of peace and security. Today we celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security, and we realize that it might be too soon now to fully digest to what extent this resolution is going to impact the work of peace-building efforts around the world. I expect it will be up to all of us now, to civil society and the UN agencies, and indeed any future peace talks and the current ones as well, to involve youth in a strategic way. Some of the countries affected by conflicts, the vast majority of their population are under 30 years old, and this resolution is very well capturing that age group. And speaking of the age group, I have to highlight here that traditionally the UN defines youth 15 to 24 for statistical purposes. So that was 1995, the World Program for Action for Youth. And I think one of the very important things offered by this resolution is extending that definition by capturing this age group as well, and talking that it's not enough only for 24, but we have even to engaging people in their 20s. And that's what I call usually the black hole in peace-building efforts, because you see today that we have very little programs offered for young people when they are 16 and above. It's much easier to invest more in schooling and offering programs for children, but the situation of young people, and particularly in conflict settings, are very alarming, because you have a situation where young people have absolutely no prospects for education, higher education, vocational training, or even a job opportunity in the future. And I have always warned that we should not leave young people in conflict settings with a situation where the only opening for them, or the only alternative, is becoming offered by radical and extremist groups. That's very, very dangerous. So that's why I think the participation element is extremely important here. As I said, might be too soon now to fully know how that will play out in the reality of different peace negotiations. But I could second that resolution with a call that we have now to start seriously looking how to engage young people in all these different peace talks and ensure that they do have a seat at the table. And in some of these countries, you know that they took to the street, young people took the streets demanding change. And when things went off a track, basically they were not invited to bring things back on the track. So I think clearly the lesson we learned today, there's no peace without development for young people, there's no development without peace. But I would say there's no peace nor development without engaging young people and investing in youth.
Mr. Dranka?
Well, just for the end, getting this resolution to the Security Council is a big deal, because it's as big of a deal as that of having brought women issues 15 years ago. Because much of the time there are those who argue these are development issues, and why do you want to bring them to the Security Council, keep them in the General Assembly? This is to say, true, part is development, and development is General Assembly, but nobody could deny now that the youth element is just essential for security purposes. The development issue is necessary, of course, and that goes without saying, but the security elements is what we have to realize, and everybody needs to invest. I'm sure you're impatient to know what we're going to do, but this is a long process, and it's a process also of consultation, of putting in ideas, trial, discussion. It's not something that we have and that we're going to bring out of our hats like that, but already acknowledge that this resolution in itself is a big achievement.
Thank you. So I want to add to this that because I actually come from a conflict-affected area, and I have seen that young people, they are at the forefront of these extremist groups. They are being recruited by these militant groups, although this is the ideology. They use this ideology to recruit young people, but this is not what actually young people want to do. but they are at the forefront. So by passing this resolution, the world has for the first time recognized that young people can be the peace builders as well. And it is very important to engage them in peace building processes, giving them some alternative narratives that, because, it's not that they have to join militancy if there is not anything else, but through this document, now we will be able to push governments to held accountable so that there are more opportunities for young people in our country, and they are not joining the militant agenda, but they are working to actually implement this Peace and Security Council. And I would also say that there is always like money for war there are always money for bombs, but when we see there are always less money for education, less money for youth employment, and less money for women empowerment as well. So this resolution will help us to push the policymakers as well, that there should be funding and there should be money for young people and peace and security as well, not just the wars and weapons.
Mr. Taranto, did you want to?
Just as 1325 actually has compelled the UN to actually demonstrate how it's translating the resolution into programmatic effects, I would think that this resolution, as it's being socialized and better understood, is going to pretty much go the same way, is that we will end up having, at least certainly in the type of programs that we support through the Peacebuilding Office, just as we've had gender marker initiatives, most likely we will end up having youth marker initiatives, because I think it is important to show a change and difference in the type of programs that we're doing. Already seeing the importance of the sustainability aspect. I think this is what's key here. If we want sustainable peace building, if we want to really undertake conflict prevention as the topmost priority of this organization, as we are redefining the work of the Peacebuilding Commission and how it relates to the Security Council and how we actually integrate peace and security issues with development and human rights, then working with youth is a fundamental must. The resolution actually does call where appropriate and where it's reasonable, and I think Yemen was a case in point, that it was extremely appropriate and necessary to bring the youth into what was then the national consultation process. In Burundi, specifically, as you've asked, we do have ongoing, quite important programs working with youth, and actually a very challenging one where we're trying to, with the Special Envoy Jamal Ben Omar, but also with the African Union and the East Africa community, we have earmarked, for example, funding to help in the eventual disarmament process of youth who have been recruited into militias linked to different political parties. This has been acknowledged to be one of the drivers of the conflict and human rights abuses. And so we're right center in this discussion with means to try to actually address something, is how we reintegrate this youth as constructive members of their society. And so this whole notion of the culture of tolerance, the dialogue, finding employment, livelihood opportunities is very much part of what the UN, obviously working with the government and other organizations on the ground, should be about. So it's tackling all these dimensions of sustainable peace and prevention that I think this resolution is very powerful and very important for us to programmatize, if you will, some of the important recommendations.
Just one more question right here in the front.
Thank you, Abdel Hamid Siyam of Al-Quds Al-Arabi. And I have two questions, one for Your Excellency, the Ambassador, and for Ahmed. And first, I want to say we're really going to miss you leaving the Security Council membership. We were proud of you, and we commend you, and I hope we will continue to count on you when we need some questions. My question, Madam Ambassador, about the question of Palestine during your membership. We were hopeful, or many Arabs were hopeful, that you will push hard to advance some kind of progress. And the 2 years about to finish, and there is no progress. In fact, lately, there was a presidential statement from France, and we don't know what happened to it, and a draft resolution from New Zealand, and we also don't know what happened to it. So if you can enlighten us on that issue. My question to Ahmed is about the Arab youth. By the end of 2010, early 2011, they went to the street, the young, the educated, the non-partisan, the nationalists who wanted and were banging on the wall for democracy, freedom, dignity, and respect of human rights and rule of law, end of corruption. And look what happened to them. I mean, many of them now ended up in jail or in exile, and they were discredited. Some of them are now revisiting that effort, saying, what we gonna get if we go back again to the streets? And we rather have a ruthless dictator rather than the kind of chaos and dismemberment of the country itself. So how are we going to address the Arab youth on that perspective? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your kind comments, and definitely it has been a very heavy 2 years for Jordan with all the files that we had to deal with, and you can always count on us, because even if I always say, if we leave the Security Council will not leave us. So we unfortunately, most of the files that the Council deals with have to do with Arab countries, even the African, most of the time. To answer your question, I have to tell you two parts. First of all, I would like to join your frustration on the inability of the Council to advance on the Palestinian-Israeli issue. As you may know, and you might guess, we are directly involved in the Palestinian issue on so many levels. First of all, as Arabs, second of all, as neighbors, third of all, as a large number of Palestinian Jordanians being refugees or having the refugee status. Third of all, as many of the files that need to be discussed do concern us, be it refugees, be it Jerusalem, be it water, be it security, borders, any solution, we are directly invested in it. So I share your frustration, and I can tell you it's not easy. This is one file that is not easy to deal with in the Security Council. Now, for the second part that I want to answer is that we have tried to do our utmost, and I will remind you that in August last year, when I did arrive, I arrived on the 1st of August, and on the 2nd of August, or 3rd or 4th, I don't remember, we had a resolution on Jerusalem that was already in blue, and we wanted to vote for it, but the decision not to was not ours. A second time, we did present a resolution in December, and it was not able to pass. We had many press statements, and one of the most important press statements that was done under our membership was on Jerusalem and the recent events, and it was for the very first time that the Security Council refers to Jerusalem holy site as Al-Haram al-Sharif, which was already a big thing. Now, having said that, the results are not there, but you know very well by asking me this question that I would probably be as frustrated as you are, because at the end of the day, it's a political will, political decision, and it does not come from us. However, during our presidency, our membership, and when we did have the presidency, actually, this was a very, very complicated issue. Now, as for the different propositions that were, they were not always satisfactory either to the Palestinian side. So this I do not like to come in a press conference and talk about the details of negotiations and what's happening behind, because it would not be fair to anybody. But it's true, much of the time, the resolutions were not satisfactory. And this is something to respect, because at the end of the day, it's their case. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, thank you. Well, when it comes to the situation of Arab youth, I think it's obvious that Arab youth are paying a price when it comes to their situation today. After, as you rightly said, they have demanded change. They were dreaming of, I would say, a process that could bring democracy in many parts of the region, and many legitimate demands for this largest generation of youth in the history of the Arab region. Today, when we look to the indicators and the numbers, they speak to themselves. The Arab region has the highest youth unemployment in the world. Half of the Arab countries are either in conflict settings now or fragile security situation. We have a generation of young Arabs who are 1 out of 3 Arabs, young Arabs, is either unemployed or working poor, working but still in poverty. We have a situation for many young Arabs where for them to travel to the 22 Arab countries, they need an average 16 visas. So the question of mobility is almost a mission impossible for many young Arabs. And we clearly have a situation today where many of these dreams were smashed, basically. But I still have hope. And I have hope because clearly, with this massive generation of young Arabs, the region cannot afford to lose this opportunity, for bringing them back to public life. Where I disagree usually that there are a tendency of blaming youth in the region for problems and conflicts where are the victims of. They are not the causes. And I see this tendency all the time of blaming youth and blaming young people to the streets or demanding a better future. Of course, I disagree with that. I think young people should not be blamed, but rather should be listened to. I've been trying to work closely with many governments in the region. I reached out to the Council of Ministers of Arab Youth, Ministers of Youth and Sports in the Arab region 2 times. I spoke to them last April. I just came from Kuwait now, where they were having the meeting of the executive office of that ministerial council with 9 Arab ministers of youth and sports, and we repeatedly told them that we are ready to help, and we are ready to engage, and we are ready to see how we can find better venues for youth participation in the region, and to bring back the youth and their energy, because we are seeing now many young people are just migrating from not only from their countries but also migrating the news, even from being engaged in the public issues now and being part of trying to meaningfully contribute to their countries. So our last offer is we need to support that the League of Arab States with the development of a regional youth strategy that was adopted by the Executive Office of the Ministerial Council. And we will do that. We will offer the support in revising the youth strategy and the youth policy in the Arab region. UNDP is releasing soon the Human Development Report for the Arab region, entirely focusing on young people. I would invite you as well to maybe we should have another discussion on the situation of Arab youth after that report is released, because I think it's capturing very well what happened over the past 5 years in the region and how young people have been affected, and providing some recommendations for what could be done. That's in relation to today's resolution. I think at so many levels, from the participation, protection, prevention, reintegration, we have a strong statement from the Security Council, a resolution that hopefully could offer a new path for engaging this large generation of young Arabs and the achievement of peace and security in the region. We clearly have today no other option but to engage young people. And yesterday I was asked, will the region be able to engage youth in participation efforts, and what the resolution is calling for, the participation of young people in peace and security. And my answer is basically the region cannot afford to not engage its youth at this stage, because it's impossible to have a lasting peace without the engagement of young people. So probably in that note, I would share also your frustration when it comes to many of the indicators in the region, when it comes to the situation of Arab youth. I would say we do have more political awareness today, and the UN is doing its share there by engaging with the ministers of youth and sport in the Arab region, with the League of Arab States, and we truly hope that the Human Development Report in the Arab region would serve both as a reminder as second, to offer some policy recommendations for what could be done. We're very committed to engage more in fixing the situation of Arab youth, but I think we clearly have to approach youth issues in the Arab region with a sense of urgency, which clearly I am feeling now with this with the adoption of this resolution.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That's all we have time for today. Thank the panelists, and thank you for joining us.